So I'm scrolling Facebook this morning, right? And I'm seeing, usual posts, things about autism, things about anime and whatnot. And then I come across a post with a comment from a random person. And then it just made me want to start off this episode with that specific topic. And then I'm going to just wing it from there. So without further ado, welcome to this week's episode of Divergence and Divine. My name is WIllspiration. And I want to start off this week with the topic of undermining autism diagnoses in general, because I saw a post about autism and late diagnosis and, trying to make sure that we promote autism awareness more, especially because it's Autism Awareness Month. And somebody posted the stereotypical, oh, everybody's a little bit autistic. And it's just like, first of all, the amount of, ooh, my mic is peaking. Give me 1 second. But yeah, the amount of people that went off after that person, insane. Completely insane. Because it's 100% false. Not everybody is quote unquote a little autistic. You either have it or you don't. There's no in between. You can't be a little autistic. Like, that's just impossible. I mean, if you think that you're a little autistic, you might have ADHD, because ADHD does share some overlapping symptoms with autism, but that doesn't mean that you're a little bit autistic. It means that you're ADHD. And then obviously you can have both. Like I do. I'm an ADHD, or I have autism and ADHD. So no, you can't be a little autistic. That's neurotypicals really need to stop with that, because that is very detrimental to the autism community, and it doesn't help promote awareness. It actually, okay, so for neurotypicals that are listening to this, what you're doing when you say that is you are undermining a person's diagnosis. You are saying, oh, you don't matter because we're all a little autistic. You just need to get over it. It's like, okay, just because I have level 1 autism and ADHD does not mean that I can just get over it. And again, like I said last week, a lot of I came to the realization that my podcast kind of is more so for people that are ADHD rather than just one or the other, because of the fact that a lot of the things that work for me, at least from what I've noticed, might only work for ADHD people, depending on how autism and ADHD affects them. Because it's like I was saying before, and like I've been saying on forums and stuff, that it's now suspected that ADHD is a spectrum like autism is, which means that you can't just be inattentive or hyperactive. It's essentially combined as now the main diagnosis, because it's it would be a spectrum. So depending on the severity of your symptoms, you could be more inattentive, or you could be more hyperactive, or you could be more somewhere in between. There's a lot of symptoms, and like I just said, a few seconds ago, there are some symptoms of ADHD that do overlap with autism. So there's that. And like I was saying last week, it kind of came to that, I came to that realization myself. But I want to stress that if you still want to try to give it a shot, whether you only have ADHD or autism, and see if what I recommend, what I tell you guys from my personal experiences that have worked for me, if you want to give them a try, that's great. If they don't work, I'm sorry in advance if it doesn't work for you. But at least you gave it a try, and that's always a good thing, is always trying to find new ways to be able to, cope and work on ways to manage your autism. So hopefully at some point, maybe something that I say will help, but I kind of feel like most of my advice would work better for ADHDers. Again, ADHD is short for autistic ADHDer, so somebody like me that has autism and ADHD. It's just to keep it, it's not an official diagnosis, it's just to keep it short when you're talking about someone who has autism and ADHD. It's just easier to say ADHD, because then you don't have to say both diagnoses at the same time. Anyway, so back to what I was saying. If ADHD is a spectrum like autism, then yeah, it's going to affect everyone differently. But still, at the end of the day, you can't say that you're a little autistic if you don't have an autism diagnosis, because even then, if you're autistic, you're not a little autistic. You are autistic. There are levels, but even then, I'm not sure who created the levels, but honestly, with the fact that a large majority of the mental health field is neurotypicals, I wouldn't be surprised if it was a neurotypical that came up with the levels as a way to break down the severity of autism. But at the end of the day, it's still a spectrum. But that comment just really made me mad, though, because it's something that you hear a lot. Even my dad's like, oh, I think I'm a little autistic. It's like, Dad, no, you're either autistic or you're not. Like, you can't say you're a little. Maybe you're ADHD, which, does share some overlap with autism, but that doesn't mean that you're autistic. That means you're ADHD. So to me, that just is, you know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of, I don't know. And then I read somewhere like where there was like talk about where people want to just merge ADHD with autism because of the amount of overlap that there is, and it makes it hard to diagnose one or the other. So it's like, if there's enough overlap, that the autism diagnosis should just absorb ADHD diagnosis, and that basically ADHD should just become an official diagnosis. And to me, I just kind of go, But the problem is that they don't share enough. Okay, if ADHD shared 75% of the same symptoms or more that with autism, then yeah, I could understand the justification for merging the two and just treating ADHD as autism as well. But that's not the case. So you can't, just because you have overlapping symptoms doesn't mean that you have autism and ADHD. It just means that you have ADHD. However, if you have more than enough of both symptoms from either one, then yes, you can be an autistic ADHDer. You can be ADHD, yes. So I just wanted to kind of start that, just start the episode off by saying that you can't be a little autistic. You're either autistic or you're not. So, and let me tell you, it was an older lady. I'll be honest. Her profile picture looked like she was probably in her late 50s, early 60s. But still, you can't say that. And honestly, I just think that people actually that are on the spectrum rushing and telling her, that was not okay to say was good. But there were also, the way that people handled that comment was also you could have said it a little bit nicer. Because I think the biggest issue, and this is going to be a nice segue because I just thought of another topic I wanted to talk about, so I'm going to segue into it. The other thing too is the way that you say things, the way that you word it, the tone and the inflection. Because for example, if you noticed, when I first started talking about it, I was, you could hear, the passion of, I hate it when people say this. And then, now I'm a little bit more calm talking now. So that's why I say, inflection and tone is very important with how you say things, because sometimes it may be taken the wrong way. Just because, yeah, sure, I was mad about a particular, topic. Yes. Now, if you have something in your head that you're thinking about, or something just happened that made you upset and it's on your mind, and someone asks you something, asks you a question, or they go, hey, I got a question, and you answer with a what, but, obviously angrier because something just happened, people are going to, other neurodivergents and even neurotypicals are going to think that you're mad at them or that you are having an attitude when you're not. You're like, something bad just happened. So it's always good to clarify that, like, you're not in a good mood beforehand. Like, I've gotten pretty good at catching myself, like, when I'm in one of those moods where if I say something that doesn't sound right, I will immediately just be like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean for it to come out like that. I'm just having a really bad day. And then just ask the person, basically, what's up? Like, what do they need? And it makes it very easier, because that's communication 101. Like, if you're in a bad mood and you snap at someone, it's always best to just apologize immediately after, because then you go, I'm sorry. And it's because it's true. It's not like you meant to snap. I mean, some of us, if not most of us, have issues with emotional regulation. So it's like, if something made us mad, we're probably going to be mad for a bit before we finally start calming down. And sometimes you just kind of snap on people and it's not intentional. You're just kind of like, oh, my bad. I am having a day, man. Like, let me tell you. Well, not fun. And then you typically, at least for me anyway, I'm not sure if this is true for other people, but at least for me, it really helps kind of like be a grounding point when I see people. Because typically I know that it's very common with people on the spectrum. And I believe it might be something that overlaps with ADHD. I'm not sure, but like, we all know that a lot of us struggle with, reading subtle body cues and, like, just social cues in general. But I think another thing is sometimes, we don't always know what other people are feeling. And this is true whether you're neurodivergent or neurotypical. A lot of us don't know what's going on in someone's head. So a lot of us don't know what someone else is feeling. There are some people that are pretty intuitive that, like, even if they can't read subtle body language, or, they don't really pay too much attention to facial expressions, like, they can just kind of tell something's off. Like, it's just kind of like a gut feeling that they have. Like, some people are just really in tune with their intuitive side, so they kind of just get this sixth sense that something's off. But generally speaking, like, you don't really know what's going on in someone's head or in someone's life. So you can't always assume that something that they say is personal towards you. It could just be that, like, they're not having a good day. Maybe they just got some bad news, or, or maybe even just like something like, for example, like, my car key not broke, but the full key blade fell out of the fob casing, and I had to glue it back together. Like, thankfully it didn't happen at work. It happened when I got home from work. But if it would have happened, I would have probably been mad about it for a bit, and people probably would have been like, well, what's his problem? So just know that sometimes not everything is about you. I know it's kind of hard, especially when some, if not most of us, have rejection sensitive dysphoria, which I've already covered a couple times already in this podcast. I have 2 episodes kind of mostly dedicated to it, but that's kind of like one of the biggest things about RSD is that, like, people are in a bad mood and they come up to us in a bad mood, we just automatically assume that it's something that we did beforehand, when it's like, in reality, they're dealing with a lot of stuff and maybe they're just not in the mood to talk. So it's always good to just kind of take that with a grain of salt and not take it personally. But I don't know. I just feel like sometimes we just kind of forget that people are people, regardless of whether they're neurodivergent or not. And that people go through things all the time, and that we don't know what people are feeling unless they tell us, or unless you're just very, very intuitive and empathic. And then in which case it kind of makes it a lot more easier to tell when someone's in a mood about something. So yeah, it's always good to just clarify and communicate when when something's on your mind or something happens, because you don't want to have people misconstrued and think, oh, I must have said something that offended that person, or oh, that person is being an asshole today. I don't know why. I don't, I don't know what's going on with them. And I feel like that really hurts us who are neurodivergent, because it's like we already are looked at as weird and we're not really, you know, as respected. Hence why we have to heavily mask. So we become so focused on how people view us and what they think of us that we'll spiral if we think that people don't think of us as good people, because there's also people pleasing tendencies that we have. So it's not always a good thing, but I feel like that's kind of the biggest thing that humanity just struggles with in general, is just communication. So for me, that's one of the things that I like to do. I like to communicate with my friends and other people in my life, like when I'm in a bad mood, or if I'm going through something and I just may not answer right away, or I might just go silent for whatever reason. I always like to communicate why, like, hey, I got a lot of stuff going on right now that I need to take care of. I may not be as responsive right away, or I might not text you back right away, but when I feel up to it, I will respond as soon as I can. I just really need to focus on taking care of this, because that's like the whole point of taking care of yourself, is you got to focus on your situations and focus on your mental health and making sure that you're good before you can help other people. Because if you are struggling to take care of yourself and you're helping other people, then you don't really have the energy to help yourself at the end of the day. And another thing that I find that helps too is if you have RSD, that is something that, I feel like doesn't have enough awareness. But like, if you have RSD, like, mention it and just kind of explain what rejection sensitive dysphoria is, and just kind of explain to people that if something happens, that just know that it wasn't because of them or because anyone did anything to you, but sometimes that your brain just misconstrues things from, past events, and you kind of feel like they're happening again, and it just triggers this overwhelming sense of rejection. And sometimes you just need a couple days to get your head straight and, not spiral. Just because again, just to briefly touch on it, even though I already have 2 other episodes of this up for talking about rejection sensitive dysphoria, but like, it's pretty easy to spiral. And when you spiral with RSD episodes, you tend to become very clingy, and you tend to apologize a lot and feel like you did something wrong, even though you could be told 100 times over that you did absolutely nothing wrong and have nothing to apologize for. But the RSD makes you believe that that's a lie, and that your friends are just trying to cover up that they don't like you. And that's never really the case until it becomes a very persistent and prominent issue with you, that you constantly do that. Then people will call you exhausting, they tell you that you're too much, and then they don't want really anything to do with you. I've lost plenty of friends throughout my life because of my RSD, and it kind of sucks. But the biggest thing is really learning about RSD and kind of learning when to spot an RSD spiral before you start spiraling, because again, RSD is its own standalone diagnosis, but it can activate and trigger depression symptoms, anxiety symptoms, and PTSD and trauma responses in general. So that's also something to be aware of, and something to work on in therapy if you suspect that you do have RSD. Just so then that way it's not only better for yourself, but it also won't affect any relationship, whether it be with family, significant other, friends, etc. And then it really helps with your mental health too. So I always encourage people to look into that if they are on the spectrum, because trust me, if I would have known that I had RSD like when I was in my early 20s, then by the time I was like 25 or 26, I would have had a way better handle on it. And I feel like there are a lot of things in my life between 26 and now that happened that probably wouldn't have, had I just, had myself together. with RS, like with taking care of RSD and everything like that. Because it's never going to go away, but it is kind of something that you have to manage. But there is a level of complexity of things that go on with being on the spectrum and with being ADHD that is just really hard. I mean, if you notice that, like, when I like talk about topics and stuff, like sometimes I might jump around, sometimes I might, I may forget what I was talking about and just kind of move on to another topic. But that's just kind of, part of the beauty of being neurodivergent, I guess. It's just not editing that kind of stuff out, like just not trying to hide it. It's just like, oh, I completely forgot what I'm talking about, so I'm just going to switch topics because, especially when you're doing a podcast episode, because then you just kind of want to keep the train moving rather than stopping. But it's just so interesting to me how people view neurodivergence. You got people that think that autism is a disease that needs to be cured. You got people that are like myself that actually don't mind being neurodivergent. You got people that are neurodivergent that wish they were neurotypicals, and even neurotypicals that wish they were neurodivergent. And it's just so interesting to see like the many, many different perspectives on it. But at the end of the day, like, everyone's still human. And I just feel like we neurodivergents always just have that bigger challenge, like those bigger obstacles to overcome that kind of feel like anthills to neurotypicals are like mountains for us. And it would just be nice if neurotypicals would, actually listen for once. Because I don't know about any of you, but I've only met very few neurotypicals that are actually understanding. A lot of neurotypicals are just very not understanding. They don't have the patience to deal with neurodivergent people. They often compare us to kids still because it's like, oh, well, you're not mature enough. But here's the thing. Even if you have like trouble regulating your emotions, at the end of the day, your emotions are still key components in communication, because conveying your feelings and how you feel about something or how someone made you feel when they did something is a huge component of communication, right? So if you don't communicate that, how are you supposed to improve your relations with people, right? How are you supposed to improve your friendship? How are you supposed to work on keeping a strong relationship with your significant other if you don't communicate your emotions? And I feel like that's what a lot of, the issues with modern day dating is that, and this is interesting because this is something that my friend told me. If he's listening to this, he'll know what I mean. And that it's just a while back, like back in 2016 or 2017, he was just telling me how the culture of dating now is being friends with benefits first, and then seeing if there's bedroom chemistry before actually dating the person. And I always thought, and I still do think, that it's wrong that you have to sleep with a person first before giving them a chance. Like, sex is not the most important thing in a relationship. It isn't. Like, the emotional and like spiritual aspect, like the mental of it is the most important thing. Because I mean, I get it. There are horny people out there that like all they do care about is sex, and sex is the most important thing to them. But you also have to understand that it's not actually as common as you think. Like, there aren't as many people with a high sex drive out there as you might think. And those people can date each other, that's fine, but that doesn't mean that you have to force yourself to date someone that's like that. And a prime example was my first girlfriend. And fun fact, I didn't actually have my first girlfriend until I was 26. And it was, well, how should I put this? It was interesting, but it was also kind of sad because, long story short, we met on OkCupid, and she was already having a lot of health problems as it was. And she ended up with functional neurological disorder. And basically, like, any FND is very weird. I'm not sure if anybody here that's neurodivergent has FND, so maybe it's different. I'm not sure, but all I know is that basically if she gets too overwhelmed by anything, she just goes straight into a seizure. Though there were times where it was kind of questionable because there were most of the time whenever she would have these, she would have, like the post seizure exhaustion. It took a little bit for her brain to kind of, reset, like typical seizure symptoms, right? But then there were times where she would come out of it and she would be like totally fine, like as if it didn't happen. And it kind of made me question if she was faking them or not. I didn't say anything, of course, because that's not the kind of person that I am. But we ended up dating. And then after about 3 months, she just kind of didn't have feelings anymore. So it seemed kind of weird to me because the more the relationship went on, the more it was just about sex. All she wanted was sex. There were times where she would want to make out in the parking lot. There were times where, she would want me to pleasure her in my car, not like having sex, but, like other forms of sexual stimulation. And then there was one time where I brought her over to my condo and she, it was just, literally, it was just, we didn't even make it up the stairs before we were already kissing and all over each other. And when we broke up because of my RSD, which I didn't know I had at that time. But when we broke up, she told me, first of all, that I was the 25th guy that she had slept with. So I was her 25th friend with benefits, and that I was only her 5th boyfriend, and that the whole reason that she was on OkCupid was because she wanted something casual. She never wanted a relationship. And then that's when it hit me when my friend said that a lot of relationships typically start with friends with benefits and then move into an actual relationship because they want to see what the bedroom chemistry is like. And then that came to that realization that that's not the kind of person that I am. I don't want to have sex with somebody that I just met because I'm still, I wouldn't say normal, but I just kind of feel like it makes more sense to get to know somebody before you start having sex with them, because it's like when you have sex, it's a very intimate act, right? You're basically, it's the most, I guess, if you want to be technical, not even just in a biblical sense or any sort of religious sense, but just in general, it's a very sacred act. This is the first time that you're getting to see your partner naked. This is the first time that you're actively doing something that brings you both pleasure. It's also, an act that is the act of, what leads to pregnancy and, having a child. It's a very sacred, special thing that, you should only have with somebody that you love. But, obviously when you're obviously some people just have a higher sex drive than others. Some people, their sex drive, just teenagers and early 20s are just, it's very high, and that's all they can think about. It's just having sex and having sex and having sex. And you know what? Everybody's different. Some people are going to have high sex drives their whole life. Some people will have a high sex drive when they're young, and then it kind of just evens out as they get older. Some people may even start with a low sex drive, and then it ramps up as they get older. But at the same time, regardless of your sex drive, it still doesn't matter if you don't get to know the person first, because the one thing you don't want to do is to basically give a piece of yourself in this sacred act to somebody that's not going to end up being in your life forever. And it kind of sucks because, all of us at some point are going to have sex with at least 2 or 3 people on average before we find the person that we're meant to be with the rest of our lives. Other people are going to just continuously have sex until they find good sex and then be like, okay, I want to actually get to know this person. But I still encourage everybody to actually get to know somebody first before you have sex, just because those are kind of the messiest breakups, is when you became sexually invested in somebody and then they, break up with you and then tell you that you were just only there to fill their sexual urges and nothing more. it's very hurtful. And it's just something that I would never do. And it's kind of sad, but that's what dating culture is now, especially with younger generations. Like with this newer generation, it's like it's all about sex. It's all about pleasure. It's all about you make me feel good physically, but I'm not sure how you make me feel emotionally or, mentally until it's too late. And I don't know. It just, things are so messy now that it's starting to affect like even just the older generation and like older people in general as well. And it's really sad. So that kind of, again, just loops back to communication, and also why I do not recommend dating people online, because that is a very prime example of why you don't want to meet somebody online. Because on a dating profile, you can lie and say that you want a short-term relationship, a long-term relationship, to find somebody to marry. But in reality, all you want is just sex. So you're not going to put you want something casual, because everyone knows casual means, oh, I just want a friends with benefits. And if somebody doesn't want that, you're not going to get a lot of traffic on your profile. So then you lie and say you want a relationship. And then things just don't end up going the way you want them to, because this person wasn't honest from the start. So, and again, that also comes back to communication, and also brings in integrity and honesty of, taking accountability for the things that you've done and the things that you've said, and just holding yourself accountable and making sure that you're communicating clearly your boundaries and what you're looking for in a relationship, and just kind of, having respect for yourself on top of respecting others. And if somebody can't do that, then they're not worth really getting to know, because at the end of the day, like, your peace of mind is more important than trying to befriend someone that may not actually be good for you mentally. So that's just something to always keep in mind. But with that, I am going to end this week's episode. And I know I did a lot of rambling, and I know I did a lot of topic switching, so I apologize if it gets a little confusing. I'm trying to work on that. I've never really been good at telling things in order, so that's my bad. But at least some of the stuff just re-looped back into each other, so that kind of works. But as always, if you guys enjoyed, make sure you like the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the notification bell, because the notification bell will let you know when I upload new episodes of the podcast. And with that, I am going to edit this video, because this is literally Friday and I go to work tomorrow, because as you guys know, I work the weekend shift at my work. So I got to get this edited and uploaded before I go to bed. So I will see you guys next week. And I hope you guys have a good weekend and a good start to your week. And I will see you guys again next week. So until then, bye-bye.